Welcome back to the Weekly YouTube channel. I am your host, Owen, and today I'm just going to make a little fun video here for you guys. It's going to be a tier maker, and I thought in the essence of, playoffs are starting, a bunch of teams are looking forward to the draft, pumping out some more draft content, some more draft-heavy content. So I wanted to make a tier list for position value in the draft. Now, you'll see a lot of people typically make their big boards based on just who has the best grade, or who has, the best tapes, things like that. Whereas other people may also factor in position value. And that's always something that's factored into the actual draft process itself. Some people factor it into their pre-draft process with their big board. Most NFL teams, I think, just separate all the positions and then grade the positions amongst themselves. And then, based on position value, designate where they want to go with their pick. So today, I'm going to try to eliminate all the things like pretend you're a team that has no players on the roster right now. You need just players in general and, all equal playing field. Which position are you going first? Which position will you wait to take at the end of the draft? This is going to be more first round focused, like which of these players, which positional player value I would take in the first round. So some of these I'm more willing to take in the later rounds, say like a linebacker or a slot corner, stuff like that, because they are more often or not contributing to special teams as opposed to a quarterback. So this is first pick in the draft. Where is the positional value rankings? And I'm just gonna I have them all pre-written out, so I'm just gonna bounce around real quick, just not to go in order or anything. So I want to start with probably the easiest answer, which is gonna be quarterback, S tier. We all know quarterbacks, are their draft stock is artificially inflated by the fact that they play quarterback. It's the most important position in the game. There's only a handful of good ones, and everyone's trying to find the next good one. So I think quarterback is an easy S tier. And then the only one I think is a given right now for people are looking at this which ones are going to be, given. Actually, I'm going to add another tier. All right, so I added a row because I was going to have quarterback and then a couple other positions on this row with it. But I think quarterback is, head and shoulders above each, the number one in positional value when it comes to what's your first pick going to be. If you have no players in your roster right now, you want to get the quarterback right at the very least. So all things equivalent, if every single position was graded the same and you had no players at all, you're okay, we have same grade on everybody. What position are we going to touch first? It's going to be the quarterback. Next, I think is the next easiest position to do. Most obvious, then we'll get into more of the weeds where I have them rated. But I'm going to put running back down at F. We've seen a large devaluation of the running back position in the past few years in the draft, especially. We saw Saquon Barkley go 2nd overall, Ezekiel Elliott go 4th overall. But for the most part, guys who we've said are first round talent running backs are falling to 20s, early 2nd. Bijan Robinson is one of the most hyped running back prospects we've had in the past few years, probably since Saquon. And I have real doubts he'll even go in the first, probably the 20s. But he's definitely a lot of people have him as a top 5 prospect. I mean, I'm not that high on him, but, positional, I doubt he's going to be a top 5 guy. I doubt he's going to be a top 10 guy. I doubt he's going to be top 15. The earliest I could see him going is maybe early teen or late teens, early 20s. I could see a very clear world where he drops to the 30s. And it's not because he's a bad running back, but it's because he is a running back. And that's just become a very devalued position in the age of passing the ball, and they're seen as more a complementary piece. So those are our two clear and obvious ones out of the way. Next up, we're going to go with interior offensive line, which let me adjust my notes real quick because I didn't adjust for there being another tier. All right, here we go. Interior offensive line, I have them down here in tier C, right? Yeah, I messed up my notes so bad. Tier C. Interior offensive line, we got guards and centers here, is how I describe this one. And yes, you're getting your offensive line is important, but for the interior, it's so much more based on your scheme specifically, because left tackles, you want a certain baseline, okay, we need these guys to be able to be good in pass protection, and then maybe we'll move on from there if they fit our scheme better. But that's major priority number one. Whereas the interior offensive line, if you want a more power scheme game, you're going to want to go for more power specific interior offensive linemen. And if you miss out on that elite guy, that's fine as long as you have someone who can fit what you want to try to run or what you're trying to do, what you're missing in that offensive line. As well as you can draft tackles and other offensive linemen and then try them out on the interior. You've seen a lot of guys who start out on the outside and then move in, rarely the other way around. So if you're going to have the option of being like, I want an offensive tackle, either left or right tackle, or an interior offensive lineman, I feel like the tackles are going to have the more value. Interior offensive line, you can draft a center, they can play guard, you can draft a guard, probably teach them to play center just to see how well their snapping is, but most likely it's center to the guard. It's just, there's a lot of versatility and flexibility that you're like, okay, even if I don't get the top center prospect or the top guard prospect, I can just draft the top center prospect in the next round and move him to guard, and it's like, am I really missing out on that much? Especially if the guy who was a top prospect wasn't a perfect scheme fit for us. So that's why I have interior offensive line in the middle. It is an important position. The offensive line is extremely important, but I think with the fact that you can move a lot of guys around in there, you can be very flexible with where you draft guys and plugging them in when they're starters as opposed to what they were in college. I feel like it's less valued than other positions. Next up, we're going to go edge rusher. This is going to be A tier. This is where you see like other first round overall picks. First overall picks are typically quarterbacks, edge rushers, and we'll get into the third position a little later. But edge rushers is getting after the quarterback. If quarterback is the most valued position, getting after the quarterback and the opposing quarterback is the second most valued, because if you don't have a good quarterback or you have a good quarterback, you're trying to stop the other one. And we've seen guys like Myles Garrett and Chase Young and the Bosas and all of them get super highly valued because they're edge rushers. Now we've hit, like in the past, we've seen that Nick Bosa, the 2019 draft specifically, we had Ed Oliver and Quinn Williams were seen as very high, floor, high ceiling, the interior defensive line prospects, and Quinn Williams has been outstanding this season. But he went third, whereas Nick Bosa went second because Nick Bosa played the edge. I feel like people had Quinn Williams above Nick Bosa. It was kind of back and forth, so it could have been a little. I feel like that's a good example for this, is where they're the same grade, but they valued the edge presence over the interior defensive line presence. So I feel like edge is slightly more valued than interior defensive line, but not as highly valued as quarterback. So getting after the quarterback, right underneath the actual quarterback itself. Next up, we're going to go with perimeter cornerback, which is going to be another A tier one. The reason I have perimeter cornerback split up from slot cornerback, which is SCB, is just there's little differences here and there, and I'll get into that more when I get into slot cornerbacks. But perimeter cornerbacks are another position where we see them go consistently top 10, top 15. Like, even if the guys aren't the best, like they're not graded in the top 15, if there's a run on cornerbacks, you're going to see guys jump up and take them and draft them a little higher, just because they want to establish that lockdown presence on the outside, especially in current day NFL where receiving and passing the ball is super effective. If you can have a guy who can lock down a number one receiver, or you can have a guy who can lock down half of the field, process zones good on the outside, you will want to go out and get that. And you've seen that. It's NFL history as well with Darrelle Revis and Richard Sherman, these guys who played on the outside, and they were just seen as lockdown guys. And if you have that lockdown guy, it's really just you're seen as a top dude. You'll never see a slot cornerback specialist like at the top of the cornerback charts, even if they are like maybe graded out as best cornerback or just like having a phenomenal season. They'll always be picked underneath like outside guys like a Jalen Ramsey, stuff like that. So perimeter cornerbacks are valued a little more than slot cornerbacks, which is why I kind of divided them up a little bit. Not saying perimeter cornerbacks can't flex into the slot. Elite perimeter cornerbacks could have that change of direction to play both. But if you had a choice between somebody who maybe lacks the change of direction agility, but is able to play on the outside with size and speed, and you have a guy who's smaller but has that change of direction to play in the slot, you'd probably take the guy who can play on the outside and not the inside, as opposed to the inside and not the outside. All right, up next we're going to go safety. I'm going to put safety down here at D. We saw a guy like Kyle Hamilton, number one overall prospect on my board, fell to like 14. And we've seen other guys who've had similar falls. There was more of a spike towards picking them up, like I think it was the 2017 draft with Malik Hooker, and I'm forgetting the other safety who was drafted that year. But we've seen safeties go in the first round, and it's not like out of this world. But I feel like the more common acceptance is like if all the cornerbacks are gone, all the slot cornerbacks are gone, if there are any high-level ones, any edge rushers, stuff like that, and you need a piece for your defensive back field, you're going to go safety, but you'll usually like want to trade down, or you'll see teams in the 30s pick them up just the way, if they're trying to replace a safety that's injured or leaving under contract, or their contracts run out. You'll see that more likely than guys who go up and draft a safety in the top 10 because they're just the best safety. Like Jamal Adams was 6th overall, and I feel like that really made people jaded towards the safety because he was a good safety, but and he went for 2 first-round picks to Seattle, But I feel like everyone has universally canned that trade as, bad for Seattle. And I feel like that's kind of scared people off of drafting safeties top 10. They're just a position where you can draft a guy in the second, third, or fourth, kind of like interior offensive line, that if you run like a deep corners, like cover 4 system, you can draft a more scheme-specific guy there. But worse than interior offensive line is like there are those success stories of moving corners to safeties, like a Jordan Poyer. But more often than not, you're gonna run out. If a corner is moving to safety, it's more likely not they're not going to succeed. Like who was the cornerback from Iowa the Packers drafted? I'm forgetting his name, but he tried to move to safety and hasn't worked out for him. So guys who are safeties in college are most likely going to have to be safeties in the NFL. Rarely are they able to convert and play in the corner stuff. That's why guys who can come down and play slot corner are a little more valued, like this year Brian Branch. But you'll want to do more traditional safeties out of the draft. There's not really that flexibility. And you can always find them later in the draft where they're more scheme-specific for you. So that's why I have them a little bit below interior offensive linemen. So we're going to jump to wide receiver here. Wide receiver is going to be a B. This could go up. If I did this in like a year or two from now, with the explosion of like Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, these top-tier wide receivers that like are being grabbed at early in the first round, that kind of pushed them up. Before that, probably would have been like a C and D with the Jerry Judys and CeeDee Lambs, where, yeah, you're always going to take some guys in the middle first round. But then we also have years like the Doxson, and who was the other guy from Minnesota? I don't even remember. But like we've seen guys, and especially like this draft too, there's probably not going to be receivers taken that much in the first round, or at least top of it. So receivers, if they're good, they'll go on the top of it. But in a general, their position is kind of devalued. Again, you can see teams waiting till like the later rounds to find more role-specific players like slot receivers or big body receivers who can win downfield, stuff like that. And they'll be able to move around guys like a guy like Justin Jefferson, who played slot a lot in college, fell because he only played slot in college, and now he's an outside receiver in the NFL. So you're going to see guys who are more scheme-specific in the college that the NFL team will wait on because they know that people are only seeing them for that specific scheme, and things like that, where they'll wait on players, and then if they can grab a guy in the third, like Terry McLaurin or DK Metcalf in late second, they'll wait until then instead of burning a top pick where they could have put that in an edge rusher or an outside corner or a quarterback, something like that. Next up is linebacker, and I'm going to have linebacker right here next to interior offensive line. Now, that might be a little confusing because linebackers are usually drafted pretty high in the first round, but they're typically seen as like the rare like middle linebackers who are like super athletic, like the modern day guys. And even then, some of those guys who've been taken in the high first round haven't really panned out. Like Roquan Smith and Tremaine Edmonds are good, but they're not like elite. You've seen guys who are elite in the league now, like Leonard from Indianapolis and Bobby Wagner and guys like that who weren't high draft picks like that. At least I don't think Bobby Wagner was a high draft pick. I'm fairly certain he was like a third-round pick. But you'll see the modern-day linebackers who are elite at their positions. They're not these high-end first-round draft picks. Even guys like Devin White have been not that great, and he was a top 4 pick, top 5 pick. So I feel like the linebacker's kind of losing its luster. You see that in nowadays where like they're not playing 3 linebackers a lot on defenses, it's a lot more nickel. And the position is becoming really devalued for most teams. Now, some teams will pay them a lot, like the Ravens and the Seahawks and Rams with Wagner and Roquan Smith, and those are just the most recent big contracts. But a lot of teams aren't valuing linebacker and aren't willing to pay linebackers super big money. Like I think Matt Milano just got $10 million a year last year, and he's one of the better outside weak side linebackers. So if you're not a middle linebacker, there's no shot you're going to go in the top of the first round. And even if you are an elite middle linebacker prospect with high athleticism and stuff like that, they might get scared off by the past drafting process, or you might have one team that's interested because they might value you lower than, say, an elite corner, an elite edge rusher, a wide receiver. Now, if you're a linebacker that can provide pass rushing, maybe you'll go up a little higher, but I feel like the median is more towards the middle of the pack here. And then, again, when you factor in outside linebackers and weak side versus strong side, scheme-specific linebackers, it really drops it down because those are ones that are going to target much more in the later rounds. All right, let's just get the elephant out of the room. Left tackle is the last of the A group. Obviously, this is all centered around being a quarterback, stopping the quarterback's favorite weapon, and now protecting the quarterback. It's very quarterback-centric up at the top. And this is why I kind of wanted to break up the two tiers, because I didn't feel like it was fair to put these next to quarterback, because they all get their value from being centered around the quarterback. Whereas left tackle, being able to protect the quarterback's blind side, that's the most important position, because they're stopping the guys you draft specifically to sack the quarterbacks to prevent them from being good. And then these guys take away the quarterback's favorite option, and they're able to just like confuse the quarterback, really get after him. I mean, I guess that's the goal of all of defense. But if you say, what's the biggest weapon against a quarterback, you're not really going to see a linebacker and just a single wide receiver, where it can help a lot. It's not going to ultimately change how the quarterback plays. So I feel like this is a good positioning here. They're all very quarterback-centric, and then the quarterback's above them all. But left tackle, kind of obvious. It's one of the highest paid positions outside of the quarterback, where they're just in charge of protecting his blind side. Now, right tackle if you're a left-handed quarterback, but this is really his blind side tackle, think of it. And yeah, these ones are going to be paid a lot more and drafted a lot higher, because there's a lot less of them that are super elite pass blockers to really keep your guy clean from the side he can't look at. So parlaying that, we're going to go into right tackle, which is going to be right here next to the wide receiver. Now, as I was talking about with left tackle, tackles are more important because they're trying to stop these edge rushers, which have a higher importance to most teams, as opposed to like the interior offensive line, who are designed to block up the interior defensive line, which a lot of teams don't see a lot of pass rushing plus out of them. They're more of the run stoppers, or they have that stigma. So the right tackles are going to be a little higher than the interior offensive line. Again, if this is a left-handed quarterback, just flip them, right tackle, left tackle. But for the traditional like right-handed quarterbacks, which we see a lot more of, right tackles are going to be a little more valued than interior offensive linemen. We've seen guys like Ryan Ramczyk go in the first round, because if you can have two bookend tackles, that's really important to your offense and to your quarterback, really protecting them there, and as well as opening up the rest of the offensive playbook with like wide zones and things like that. So getting the two tackles down is a lot more important than fixing up the interior offensive line, where the interior offensive line sometimes are even made up of former right tackle prospects, because if these guys can't make it out here, maybe lack of mobility or something like that, they'll move inside. But right tackles in general are going to be valued a little bit more, because again, they go up against these edge rushers. A lot of teams are going with a two-edge system now, where they're going to try to get two elite edge rushers, or put the elite edge rusher against your right tackle, who traditionally was a worse athlete or worse pass protector. So now they both have to be pretty high level, but there's still that stigma of the left tackle with the blind side, etc. So that's why it's a little higher. All right. I did forget interior defensive linemen, so let's just talk about that real quick. It would have been here in the B tier. I'm pretty big fan of interior defensive linemen, but the NFL in general isn't. However, trenches are very important. We've seen a real big insurgence of interior defensive line pass rush, or just effectiveness up there, collapsing pockets against guys like Tom Brady and these less mobile quarterbacks. I think that the value of interior defensive linemen is going to start going up a little more with the emergence of like guys like Jeffrey Simmons, Ed Oliver, Quinton Williams, really giving a good name to guys who can be interior presences in the pass rush. So we'll see that increase. We've already seen that with like Jordan Davis going in the top 15 last year, even though he doesn't have that like crazy pass rush upside. We're seeing more and more value put on these bigger body defensive tackles. So I'll put them here in the B next to wide receiver and right tackle. A little more important than a linebacker or interior offensive line, just because they're impacting, they have to go against them. Less athletic interior offensive line have more impact there. And linebacker, they're just going to clear the way for linebackers, things like that, where linebackers play off of them. People will be much more invested in controlling the trenches and putting more limited linebackers behind that than elite linebackers behind low-tier defensive tackle, stuff like that. But our true second to last one is going to be slot cornerback, which is going down here in the D tier. Now, slot cornerback is a very important position, which is why I distinguished it from perimeter cornerback. A lot of teams probably these days don't value it, because it's like, oh, if we have a bad perimeter cornerback, he can just move inside and play the slot, because we don't really run nickel all that much. Well, now nickel's being run a lot more across the entire NFL, and you see teams putting more value on slot cornerbacks. But still, to this day, you can get really high-level slot corners in the later rounds. Again, just off the top of my head, Teron Johnson, probably one of, if not the best slot cornerback in the NFL right now, came in the fourth round from Weber State. Like, college teams even, don't value the slot cornerback position all that much. And that's why you see a lot of people who cover the draft right now really praising Brian Branch, because he's flexible if he's safety or slot corner. So even though both his positions he plays are down here, he'll be drafted in the first round, or should be, according to a lot of draft analysts, including myself, because he plays both of these really well and is a very versatile piece in the defensive backfield. However, there's a lot of projections saying he's not going to be in the first round because these are both super devalued positions that teams are convinced they can get in the later rounds. And why can't they be convinced of that? Because in the past, you have been able to get high-level slot corners and high-level safeties in the later rounds. So that's why they're both down here in D. Now, this is where this is going to get interesting because our final pick is tight end. And this was going to be one of those like takes episodes I was going to do with draft dudes, but I've been kind of getting ghosted by them recently. Now, I don't know if it's any fault of them or not, but my take was that tight ends are actually the equivalent, if not worse, than running backs when it comes to draft value. I put them down to F. And I'm a big tight ends guy. I love tight ends in an offense. I think they give you big time mismatches. I think they're really useful in the pass game and the run game. I feel like they're really an important position. But we've seen in the past, first round tight ends that don't pan out. O.J. Howard. Noah Fant, even to a degree, hasn't really panned out as much as you'd like. T.J. Hockenson is like the one in the desert that has worked out for his draft stock. And maybe Michael Mayer can this year. But we've seen a lot of guys get drafted in the later rounds. George Kittle and Travis Kelce, both the top 2 tight ends right now. Darren Waller, all drafted in the later day 3 rounds. And they've come on and become the best tight ends in the league. Tight ends have a traditional learning curve that takes longer than most positions. So, like, the reason I say the tight end's even worse than running back is that you can draft a running back in the first round, and even though you won't get to a second contract with them, so it's not really the best, use of that pick, and you're going to be paying them more than other running backs that you could have gotten in free agency, you'll get immediate return on that first round running back. That first round running back has first round running back talent, will come in, could probably be a good running back for you for like 3-4 years, and you'll get immediate return on that. You draft a tight end in the first round, there's no guarantee they will be good until like the second or third year they're playing. Don't expect them to come in and be a day one, all pro or Pro Bowl level tight end, because that's just not how tight end works in the NFL. You need to be like a unicorn to be able to be in the tight end position, like a traditional tight end, not like Kyle Pitts, who was a glorified receiver, but still is one of those better tight ends who transitioned to the NFL because of that skill set. Like T.J. Hockenson, like I said, he's like the one person in the desert who like came in his first year was a pretty good tight end rookie. You don't ever see that. So that's why it's much more important that you take your first round pick and spend it in this top half of the tier list. You put it into a tight end because you're not going to get immediate year 1 impact. You're most likely going to have to wait 2 to 3 years for them to fully develop and actually become that player you thought they were going to be when you drafted them. And you can always get the top end guys in the later rounds, because at least if you're spending a later round pick on them and they don't pan out for the first year, then that's fine. You're like, okay, they're a late round project. First round pick, there's so much pressure and hype on them for being a first round pick. If they don't deliver in year 1, which tight ends typically, like 90% of the time, don't, then there's going to be more pressure on them after that, and you don't know how that's going to affect the player's psyche and things like that. So tight end, largest learning curve when it comes to college to NFL, and also just, I think it's a bad waste of a first-round asset, because now you're basically not getting any return on that investment, that high-level investment, at least for the first year. But anyway, that is my position tier list for positional value when it comes to the NFL draft. I know I'm going to have a couple controversial takes in here with where I have things placed, but I think the top of it's pretty nice with quarterback, edge rusher, and perimeter quarterback, left tackle. Everything else like that, I could be convinced to be moved up or down outside of maybe the F tier. Everything else in the middle, you could probably make a good argument to me. But for right now, this is how I'm liking it. If you guys see this and want to comment how you change it up, go ahead and do so. And I'll be back with some more episodes later this week.